This is Eric Schultz, developer advocate at Outer Curve Foundation, with part 2 of my series on creating a visitor pattern toolkit using Outer Curve NuPattern. I strongly recommend that you watch part 1 if you haven't already. There's a link that should be popping up now to take you to it. Also, check out the blog entry that corresponds to this tutorial and gives you the instructions for installing NuPattern and getting the GitHub repository of my visitor pattern code. Now that we know what it's like to use a NuPattern toolkit, let's find out how I created one. To get started, we installed the latest version of NuPattern into Visual Studio 2013, and I've opened the solution from the Visitor Pattern GitHub repository in Visual Studio. The first thing you might notice is that the Solution Builder pane is open with a bunch of elements inside. That's because NuPattern's tools actually are a NuPattern toolkit. In fact, if you look at the New Solution element window, you'll see that you can create a NuPattern toolkit right from here. If you're starting to create a NuPattern toolkit, this is the best way to get started. So now that you know that, we'll close that window and it's time to talk about how this toolkit is constructed. The first thing you need to do is look at your default view. In this case, it's actually open. A toolkit can have multiple views of a pattern depending on how complex it is. In our case, we only have a default view. A view is what fills the elements of the Solution Builder pane. So let's look at our default view that we have right now. You'll see all these elements in our view. These correspond to the logical elements in your solution pane. In the upper left, we have the visitor pattern and its corresponding default view that we're looking at right now. You also see connected to the default view box is the projects collection, the project collection, singular, and the class element. The major difference between collections and elements is that a collection can have children. It's also important to note the cardinality of the connections. In this case, it's a one-to-one cardinality. In here, it's a zero to many, and also zero to many over here. You actually edit the cardinality of the connection by clicking on the connection and looking in the properties pane. Thanks for watching on the basics of the pattern definition editor in Outer Curve NuPattern. Next time, we'll discuss variable properties, launch points, and automation on elements to actually start composing our toolkit.